Hello, welcome. I'm Tim, one of the directors at Five&Co, and we partner with teams across life sciences to really help them to thrive. And today, I've got a really good friend with me, Harry, who's going to really help us to address this question of how do we improve speed and efficiency in highly regulated workflows without compromising quality, judgment, or trust. And again, Harry, I spent a lot of my time working with leaders under immense pressure in highly complex environments where pace and efficiency is worth literally millions. And so I'm really excited for this conversation. Just to say to everyone, Harry's somebody who I've been able to journey with a little bit over the years, and incredibly has built a few successful businesses already before his latest venture with Siguru AI. Harry, welcome. Love to hear just a few words from you as an introduction.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you for having us on as well. Yeah, looking forward to today's chat. It's going to be good fun. Hopefully, a few insights as well that everyone listening in will be able to take away. Brief introduction to myself. So, I founded my first company about 10 years ago when I was 23 in the B2B health tech space. Initially came up with the idea at the largest provider. I wanted to do it with them. They said I was too young, and then they were going to do it themselves. And then 5 years later, they were one of the companies that tried to acquire us, which was always a nice conversation. And we went down a slightly different path. So we were acquired 5 years in by a US NASDAQ listed firm. That was an amazing journey. Took it to 120 countries, supporting a couple of million people with a really important area of their mental health and well-being. Since then, I've launched another company in a very different space called Play Paddle Group. So Paddle's taking off at the moment. It's with a couple of very close friends and we're scaling that. But then the third business is a little bit more similar to the first, and that is Siguru AI. And that is a pharmaceutical compliance solution driven through AI to be able to support teams in making decisions much faster. It can save and have efficiency gains of 80%. And we've launched that across the last couple of months, having worked on that for the last year. Excited to share more. Hopefully, it will apply to things outside of life sciences as well. But AI is a very exciting space to be working in right now.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Harry. And it's certainly the thing that everyone's talking about it, aren't they, in different ways? And I don't want this to be a generic conversation in one sense. I want us to get to the heart of the problems we're addressing. But just to personally, my audience and some of the clients we're working with, it's something where we're past the point of, pilot projects. We're into adopting AI fully, but there's still wrestling with the level of resource that we should be putting here, the level of adoption and the level of risk we're taking as leaders in doing this. So let's start with looking at the problem that you've identified with Figaro, and really let's just explore that a little bit. So why was Siguru worth building? What is the problem that you're trying to solve and that you've seen?
Yeah, so it's actually one of my close friends called Dan, who works at the world's largest pharma companies. He's worked with the likes of GSK in global marketing roles. And Dan would talk me through this problem that he had consistently, where he'd create an asset for a new drug that's gone live, and you really need the marketing to be on point when you're launching a new drug. It's the difference of revenues of billions through to millions. It makes a massive, massive difference. Every asset that you create, it has to go through a highly regulated check with a review team and a medical team to be able to sign it off. Now, Dan would create an asset that would go through to the medical team. The medical team would then scan it for all of the compliance factors. It would go back to Dan. Dan would then work on it with the marketing agency. The marketing agency would make amendments back to Dan in the marketing team. Dan would send it through to the medical team again. And again, there were some differences of opinion where he had to make tweaks again. And on average, from a material being created through to it going live, it takes 40 days. Now, in the world where I was from previously, I could send something out, I could write an email, I could write a LinkedIn post, and I could post it that day. And that led to huge efficiencies. It led to a lot of speed within the marketing. It led to a lot of excitement within the intended audience. Whereas healthcare professionals at the moment, who are pharma's intended audience, are really receiving subpar marketing materials. And a lot of that's down to the bottleneck when it comes to compliance. So Dan was talking through this issue, and I couldn't quite believe it was that inefficient, especially in these multi-billion and some of them $1 trillion organizations. And Dan's background is in AI as well. So he was the coolest kid at school, where he was building websites at 14 and selling them for 10 grand. And I was there with my pocket money, my tenner a week or whatever it was that my mum was giving me. And I said to Dan, there's a really big opportunity here. And he ended up leaving GSK, a really secure role. He was flying. He was on course to do some really special things there to start this company. And so we were founded about 18 months ago. And Dan's been building it alongside a team. We've raised some significant investment from some of the world's best pharmaceutical compliance experts to build a really niche solution to be able to reduce timelines from 40 days to 7 days. And going forwards, we're hoping that it's going to be 1 day by being able to actually create the pharma marketing content from the marketing expert that would sail through to a signatory who signs it off within the same day. So then healthcare professionals can receive things that are timely, that are personalized, and that are highly relevant. So that's the direction that we're heading into. But all of the AI solutions that I see having the most impact, they're really focusing on that niche area that will save time, not necessarily replace human judgment.
Yeah, really, really exciting and great to hear, Harry, to meet with people like yourself who are at the forefront of this. It's you just mentioned it there around supporting human judgment rather than replacing it, and we know that's a bit of a fear, isn't it? Are we going to be a job's going to be lost? Are we going to replace kind of addressing some of those risk factors? Trusting it to tech. How are you designing this that human judgment really is at the heart of the product?
Yeah, so we adopt a human in the loop model. So when you hear about things like agentic AI, I think that's a big risk, especially within highly regulated industries, because what agentic basically means is it's making decisions on your behalf. And our big belief is that it needs to support the human in conducting, in our case, checks much quicker. Because at the moment, when they go through a marketing material, they've got to find all of the references. The references, there's obviously probably millions, if not hundreds of thousands of references out there and journal articles. And so they've got to be able to decipher those and get those. Then they've got to go through each of the journal article papers to find the snippet that matches the claim within the marketing material. Then they've got to go through a load of obligatory factors that the ABPI, so they're the governing body, have set out. And all of this just takes so much time. And none of it really is that valuable for a human to do in terms of the manual, low risk but high time tasks. So that's where we're then saying to teams that we could free up that element, which is 80% of the work itself. So you can focus on the 20% that is really high value, high risk stuff. So that'll turn into 80 to 100% of their role going forwards, instead of the 80% being admin tasks, which actually AI should be doing, in our opinion. So that's where we're talking about human in the loop. And I think that jobs are going to be redesigned. I don't think they're going to be replaced necessarily. But having said that, if we look at around 70 to 80% of the jobs in the 1980s versus now, 80% of the jobs didn't exist that a lot of people work in. And I saw that recently from a close friend that's working in AI. So I think we have an incredible way in our civilization of creating new jobs, new opportunities off the back of it. I do believe there'll be more caring roles, for example, because that's an area that AI won't be able to replace. But when it comes to areas like white collar work, I think it's going to really just supercharge very talented people. And those people that able to use it, I do fear about slightly, because they are going to need to have a certain grasp of artificial intelligence. It's a bit like people not being able to use Word documents now. That's going to be quite hard to have a white collar job.
Just on that point, Harry, as I say, there's a lot of teams who are seeing AI happening over there, and I see leaders frustrated that the team aren't keeping a pace. What would you be saying to teams who are struggling to keep up with AI? How do we embrace this as teams?
Yeah, it's a massive question. And if I wasn't doing Siguru AI, what I would be doing is consulting organizations on the change management when it comes to AI and how to use it. Because I think there's a massive range of literacy when it comes to artificial intelligence across similar roles, across marketing roles that we speak to in pharma. Some people have no grasp of it and are completely frightened of it, and some people are really proficient. And that's within the same organization. It's very much an individual thing. So first of all, I think there's a really important amount of training. I think there's a lot to what you do and the work that you do around mindset and adopting mindsets where people are curious, because even now, if I was an expert within AI today, in 6 months' time, my knowledge is very different because it is moving so quickly. So I think curiosity is absolutely essential for organizations to adopt that mindset, and also for them to have the freedom of getting things slightly wrong. And that's within boundaries. You don't want things to go drastically wrong, but allowing mini micro experiments that aren't too costly, aren't too time costly as well, will be really, really effective when it comes to individuals adopting this technology. And I think the final thing is, yeah, just a freedom for them to operate to a certain extent. It's obviously within the guardrails that they can't send private company information out to LLMs, etc., and setting those guardrails and being very clear, but allow people the freedom and the time to be able to do so. I think those organizations that don't, and those people that don't, they're the highest at risk. I don't think AI is going to take all of the jobs. I think it's going to be those that look to use it smartly that are going to be in a really good place, and the same with the companies too.
Yeah, yeah. What I'm hearing there is that learning agility that you're talking about, that growth mindset. That even though something's working now, to break it, to rebuild it, to go again, is going to be absolutely key for teams as they go forward. One thing just that we chatted about before we started recording, Harry, was just how actually, to your surprise, the pharma sector was actually further behind other sectors. It'd be great, just great insight, really, because a lot of us live in one world or one sector. Just tell us from your experience coming into pharmacy where you see we're behind, and perhaps why that is.
Yeah, it has surprised me. I think that I'd have made the assumption previously that because they're such large organizations that they're highly efficient. And I think there's incredible people that work within pharma. But what I have learned is, generally speaking, it's a very, very it's an environment where low risk is rewarded and high risk is really not rewarded. And there's some good reasons for that as well, right? They do need to have the parameters around it and the right regulations. And it's a extremely highly regulated industry. But I do believe that that's led to a lack of innovation within the culture, especially within certain departments. One of the phrases that I've heard a lot of is, we've always done it this way. And then when we've asked why, there's been a lack of knowledge or explanation as to why it has been done that way. And there's a lack of challenge as to why it's been done that way as well. So I think that's going to erode, in my honest opinion, with AI, because they're going to have to look to innovate. Otherwise, the other pharma companies that are innovating, that are embracing artificial intelligence, whether that's for drug discovery, all the way through to MLR, which is the space that we're in, they're going to be left behind. And so I think that a lot of people's hands are going to be forced. Now, for me, that leads to a huge opportunity because there's been a lack of innovation. A lot of the marketing efforts, if I'm being completely candid, look like they're from 2005. A lot of the adoption and approaches are very old school and they're 20 years out of date. But that leads to huge opportunity, right? And that's the way that we see it. I think I've definitely developed more of an understanding as to why that is, but I don't think pharma should be accepting that. I think that now they need to get into 2025, 2026 and kick on going forwards.
Yeah, fascinating. And I know obviously with what you're doing at the moment, you're speaking to lots of different organizations at different stages of adoption. Well, how is that being met? So
Mm.
what's the common pushback you're getting on adopting AI, like you're designing?
Yeah, there's every organization's different, but there are similarities throughout the industry. So what one thing where there's nervousness is, in certain roles, will this take my role? That is definitely a question. And my response always to that is, I can't promise that it won't, but that's not the ethos and that's not why we started it. And equally, I think the bigger risk is that you don't do anything, and you don't look to utilize AI alongside your current role and learn. I think those people that are just, AI is not going to work, I fear for them. Similarly, I think that the people that rely overly on AI are also not going to be high performers. There's definitely a happy medium there. I think there's also a concern about data security, and rightly so. Again, being highly regulated, just sending things through to LLMs and ChatGPT or Claude, for example, where it could just go into the ether. That is a big risk. So we have to do a lot of communications around the system being in a closed environment, ISO 27001 certified, so that's the global security standards. No models are trained on their data. All of those things are really crucial when it comes to procuring or for us working with someone. But in terms of the adoption of it, I have found that we work with commercial teams and medical teams. And generally, the mindsets are different there. And that's because of the KPIs that are set. So, medical teams, when it comes to compliance, it's to avoid complaints. So, what that then breeds is a culture of, we cannot afford to make mistakes, and rightly so. And so that leads to them being very protective, things taking a long time. Whereas the commercial teams, they want to look at upside opportunity and revenue generation, generally speaking. And so that's where they're looking at AI from a commercial perspective and seeing all of these gains, whereas the medical teams have a slightly different mindset towards it. So that's definitely something that we're working with teams on. And those people that are medics, their job is to spot really small details. Whereas a lot of the marketeers, big picture strategy. So we have found there are very different objections within those two areas. And I think that'll be the same across all organizations too.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Just on the inside of working with teams within compliance, there has been a real shift from compliance historically being the say yes or no to thing
Yeah.
organization, much more of a business partnering model across the aspect. So that communication piece with the medical teams, I think that's that tension actually not many teams have cracked really between
Yes.
compliance and medical. But it's really, really interesting to hear you talk about that and for teams to embrace that. Just finally, because we're kind of almost out of time. What would your message be to a senior leader of a compliance team right now, or in that space, who are looking at how much resource should we be putting into AI? How should we be working with the team on this?
Yeah, my one recommendation is to run loads of little experiments that are not time costly, they're not costly themselves in terms of finance. And you'll find certain pockets if you run the right experiments as to what's working and what's not working. I see some pharma companies say we're not going to invest in it until there's a proven solution out there. I think that's a big risk because that way you're always going to be behind chasing the eight ball. I also see organizations pumping a lot of finance into solutions that are unproven or theories that are unproven, where they might be building internally or procuring a service. And again, that's a really big risk going into a 12 to 36 month contract at the moment where the world is changing, AI is changing every single week. And so what I'd encourage organizations to do is to take a crawl, walk, run approach. And so that's where you just start by crawling with a solution. You might have a 7-day free trial, for example, with a Siguru or with someone else, depending on the area that you're in. AI providers should be providing things like that as well. There's absolutely no reason why not. Or it might be you want to be using Claude in a more effective way. How can you just do a mini experiment there for your internal processes? And then once you start to gather the data on that, you'll have loads of learnings. And off the back of that, you can make a decision. So do you want to go to run or do you want to restart the experiment? Or is the experiment actually not going to work? At that stage, let's say it's worked, you go to run. So you roll out a pilot that might be 3 months long. You then have metrics in place. You can have a pilot scorecard. We look at average days of the cycle. We look at time to market, speed to market, etc. So we'll be able to analyze all of these things in a dashboard, and that makes it really simple then for a business case to be applied to go, okay, if we can get 1,000 materials out there 80% faster, that'll free up our marketing team to have more creativity. That'll enable our medical team to focus on drug discovery rather than compliance. There's so many knock-on benefits, and so then you can build a business case, and that's where you run with it. And generally speaking, it should then work because you've done all of the hard yards beforehand. What I fear is that some organizations aren't willing to crawl and some organizations are too willing to run. So taking that step-by-step approach, not hurrying it necessarily, is definitely the way to take it.
Brilliant. Yeah, really sound advice. I really like that. So crawl, walk, run. And back to what you said earlier again, shifting mindset within the team that's going to be absolutely key for us going forward. Harry, thanks so much for this conversation. It's really nice. We hear the word AI all the time, but it's really nice to unpack it and just focus on the problem that we're trying to solve. Just to say to anyone listening, please do check out a bit more about Siguru and Harry and Dan and what they're building there. I'll put a link in any posts that we do for this. And again, just from Five perspective, thank you for your time. It's just a real privilege. What we're about is helping teams thrive. And part of that is increasing pace and efficiency and really supporting teams to enjoy the experience. So thank you, Harry. Great to see you. And we wish you all the success as you build.
Thank you.